Zina. Okay. Yes. Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. This is the inaugural meetup group of the Agile Marketing Club. So I'd like to welcome you all today. It's great to bring together a like-minded community of marketers. I'm the MD at Bright, my name is Zoe. We love all things Agile and how it enables marketers to use data to do great things at pace. Today we're going to explore the findings of a recent survey we ran, which is really interesting. We undertook it to understand what benefits people are gaining from moving to agile ways of working. Agile marketing is what sets strategic marketers above and apart from other marketers. So I'd like to introduce Sian Heaphy, who's one of our directors and our Agile delivery lead at Bright.
Thanks, Zoe. Hi, everyone. Looking forward to talking to you all today, sharing our survey insights and discussing why Agile marketing is so important now. We'll also be looking into how businesses are implementing Agile marketing in their day-to-day operations. And I'd like to introduce my co-host, Adrian, the Strategic Change Lead at the British Medical Association, who will be giving his insights and experiences from embedding Agile ways of working at the BMA in a little while.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here, Sian. I'm very happy to be here.
Great. So just a quick announcement. We will have time at the end for a Q&A. So please use the chat function in your window to submit your questions. We'll try and get through as many as we can in today's session, but if there are any that we don't get round to, we will follow up afterwards. So if you could add your name alongside the question, that would be great. So I guess before we go any further, let's talk about what we mean when we talk about Agile marketing. So Agile is a set of principles and methodologies that have been used over the last couple of decades in software and technology development. We've all seen how successful Agile ways of working have been in those areas in terms of the efficiencies that it generates, the pace of innovation, reduction of issues and risks. And Agile marketing is taking these methodologies and principles and adapting them for use in marketing. So it isn't a pure lift and shift, but it uses a lot of the values and principles outlined in the original manifesto. So, in terms of what we consider Agile marketing, it focuses on the customer. So it's very much about them, their challenges, pain points, their buyer journey, and how they engage and interact with you as a business. It's also about experimentation, using a test, learn and iterate approach to generate learnings and insights to understand what works for you, your target audiences and your customers, and what works to generate the outcomes and business goals that you're trying to achieve. And finally, it's about using short and adaptive strategies, taking a minimum viable approach, using agility to take ideas to market, adapt and generate better results. So why Agile? Now, I don't want to focus too much on COVID-19 because Agile marketing isn't new. As an organisation, we've been practicing Agile marketing for a number of years. And whilst it can help businesses manage disruption and become much more resilient, certainly in times of disruption like now, it also has much broader benefits. But as marketers, we've had to adapt quite quickly to the new market conditions. The need to stay agile and adapt to disruption is and will remain crucial for marketers and companies of all sizes. And from the conversations we've had with our own clients and other marketers in the industry at the moment, they're all experiencing fairly similar challenges, which are really around budget pressures or freezing of budgets immediately, organisational paralysis as they absorb the shock and get used to the new norm, with slowing or stalling sales cycles ringing alarm bells for many firms who need to safeguard their cash. But at the same time, there's a growing pressure to retain customers as well as build pipeline. It's hard enough figuring out what to do with less and then being expected to bring in more leads in a shorter pace of time in a very tough market. The smart firms will be able to absorb the shock, pivot their energy and budget into activities such as lead gen to set themselves up for the back end of the year. those that don't and remain in a state of paralysis with ever decreasing budgets will take much longer to bounce back. And this is only made more complex by issues that many of the marketers we surveyed earlier on this year reported experiencing with traditional marketing, such as poor data insights, lengthy planning and approval cycles, and internal processes that fail to support dynamic strategies and help them respond to market and business demands. And this leads me quite nicely into my final point around change. And talk to any scientist and change has always been a constant, but for marketers, disruption is the new norm. We're already seeing changing consumer behavior, and as a function we need to get comfortable with that, and we need to be able to adapt and manage that change, focusing on activity that aligns to business priorities and demonstrates results. What our survey revealed, however, for many traditional marketers is that there's still a significant number that find it hard to demonstrate ROI. And for those that are still using traditional techniques, and that was about well over 20% of our respondents, still don't really understand the impact of marketing on their business goals. And that should be a real concern for marketers at this moment in time, because if they're unable to find alignment with business priorities or demonstrate the ROI of this activity, then you can't be in a defendable position when asking for budget. And for a significant number of those that we surveyed, aligning to business priorities and goals, demonstrating results is a high priority, not just in times of COVID-19, but more generally. And agile ways of working and agile marketing has been a key driver for moving away from traditional marketing. And agile can be instrumental in helping marketers overcome these challenges. Agility allows you to adapt at pace and become much more resilient, not just in times of disruption. And for those that we surveyed who have adopted Agile and have been using Agile marketing for over a year, they've really seen 4 key benefits. And these are really around more effective prioritization of work, helping them to better plan their resource capacity and focus on the high value tasks that will help them achieve their goal. And talking about adaptability, effective prioritization of work also means that they're able to adapt and change their focus quite quickly around whatever that high value task may be for the business at any given time. The other benefits they're seeing is faster time to market, which comes from improved productivity and taking a minimum viable approach. They're seeing stronger data-driven decision making that's focused on the customer. And they've got greater adaptability to market change. It's given teams greater flexibility, transparency, and control over their project tasks. They're more empowered to collaborate, experiment, and react quickly to change when their ideas are validated through the test, learn, and iterate approach. So, how do you get started? So at this moment, I'd like to invite Adrian to come and talk about the BMA story. And how they've been finding embedding agile ways of working within their organisation. So, Adrian, what challenge were you facing, or what did you want to achieve when you first set out on this journey?
Thanks, Sean. That's a good question. I guess to set a little bit of context for the participants, the BMA had negotiated a new contract with NHS England that was that affected GPs. It was quite a substantial change in the primary care sort of sector, and it sort of really excited that market. There was a lot of opportunity there, and a lot of organisations that support GPs saw opportunity. And in the same way, the BMA saw opportunity. So we had a new commercial proposition. Some of it was new products and services that we'd not delivered before. Some of it was the same products and services we wanted to package up differently. So a much more commercial proposition than we'd been used to promoting to a target audience. And we knew some of the target audience were members, and we knew some of our target audience were not BMA members. So this was a new proposition to a different target audience. We needed to drive market penetration and early adoption. We needed to get in there. There was a lot of organisations trying to get in there to support GPs. We wanted to be part of that picture as well. We needed, from a project perspective, to demonstrate results quickly. You always want to show that you're being successful. And we wanted to innovate. We wanted to move away from, same approach, same results. We wanted to innovate and explore new channels and new tactics that we'd not used before.
So what led you to looking at agile marketing?
That's a good question, and some of it you've covered actually. Agile's
Yeah.
a bit of a buzzword, isn't it? We've seen it in, particularly in a tech setting, in tech projects, and it's worked really well. You don't have a lengthy plan that takes you to an outcome that people go, right, okay, was that what we really wanted? You start now, you get something done, and you're able to make a difference pretty quickly. So that sort of speed at getting something done really attracted us to agile marketing. Like a lot of organizations, we are really guilty of having very siloed teams that don't work very cohesively or don't work in very integrated ways. So we saw agile as a way of breaking down some of these silos and penetrating some of these silos, getting people to work differently. And from a personal perspective, I was the program manager that was sort of looking after the whole piece. And my ethos was, let's be different, let's try new things. There are very embedded ways of working in our organisation. I wanted, this is a new proposition to a new market. This is an ideal opportunity to do something different and do something new and introduce agile marketing as a new piece within that.
Yeah, and what was the process that you went through to start that transformation?
I think like any sort of, I take a project management approach to most things. So I understood where we wanted to be and how do we get there. So first of all, we identified what skills do we need in an agile marketing team, and where do we have them within the organization, and through conversation with the likes of Bright, we identified we need people who've got access to all of our data and know how to use it. We learned from Bright the mantra that content is the lifeblood of any campaign. So we needed content producers, people who could write stuff and get things out there. We needed expertise in terms of comms execution. How do, channel managers, how do we actually get the message out there through all the different channels that we own and use? And of course, we needed agile expertise. We'd not done this before. So that's where we developed the conversation with Bright about what kind of support we can get from Bright. And then, once we'd identified the skills we need, we started to identify people around the organization and assemble our sort of cross-functional team. We created and communicated our ways of working and our methodology. So what does that look like? It's an agile hub. It's this cross-functional, cross-working team. We said we're going to work in 3-week sprints. Every sprint will have a clear objective and a clear hypothesis. We plan. We don't have a long kind of 10-week, 10-month plan. We have a 3-week plan. Our sprint has a 3-week plan. It has a target, X number of sales, X number of tickets sold. We have KPIs, X number of emails sent, X number of percentage click-through rates, things like that. And then the other thing we did was talk to the team about some of the tactics we were going to use. We were going to use A/B testing. So a lot of it was kind of addressing some of this sort of same old ways of working. We said, well, if we do it like this, let's test it differently. So let's do some A/B testing. Let's look at a different kind of advert. Let's look at a different kind of writing. Let's look at a different tone of voice. So we started to test, learn and build in the sprint. So that was a very clear sort of communication that we sort of shared with the team. And we got, I think the last thing we did was got a working space for our Agile Hub, a space where we had some wall space where we could either put our digital, display our digital tools we were using, or just a whiteboard where we could write stuff down. So we got our space set to one side in the office where we could congregate and the hub could kind of could run.
Yeah, and that was, well, I mean, we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes anyway, but that was one of there was a challenge around sort of the tooling and what we had available from a project management perspective. And so that working space was really useful, not only from that perspective, but as well as some of the culture side of things, which we'll talk about. But very quickly, just for the audience here, Agile Hubs, which Adrian mentioned earlier, is essentially Bright's delivery mechanism, and it's a way of blending Agile expertise with in-house teams to transfer knowledge and get them up and running and using embedding agile ways of working and using it within their own teams as we start to transition off. So
that's a good point, and we really lived that. So at the start of the process, Bright were very much leading. And then we went through a transition phase where we started to pick up more of the running the stand-ups, running the hub, and Bright, we sort of segued into more of a leading role. And then when we were picking that up fully, we still had Bright on board to review, to support, to critique, all of that, and just there as a support capacity. But the sort of emphasis on Bright at the start, emphasis on the in-house team at the end.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of our audience will be keen to understand sort of what were your experiences when implementing Agile in your marketing team. What worked? What were the barriers that you experienced?
I think in terms of what went well, once we'd got our house in order, once we'd kind of got up and running, any project manager will tell you, you have a steering group or that governance structure. The people in our governance structure, the people in the steering group really started to get quite animated about that we were doing things differently and we were seeing different results. And that story, that message about we are doing things differently, we are seeing different results, really started to promulgate across the organisation. And there was quite an excitement, and the people were quite tantalised by what we were doing. Again, I have to say, from a project manager's perspective, management information is project gold, and working in bite-sized chunks in these sprints helped me really report on progress. So I could report on the detail of the number of emails sent, the hit rates, the click-through rates, the number of LinkedIn connections, how our A/B testing was going. I took to my steering group some of the A/B testing and did the test on them, which advert would they choose, and that they got really animated about that. And also target transparency. Every sprint has a target. It might be 50 ticket sales, it might be 70 something or other. How are you progressing to that target? Because you've broken down the target into bite-sized chunks, you can report in a very dynamic way how you're doing in terms of progress. So I think promulgating the excitement of working in an agile way, management information went really, really well for me. Barriers, I think these barriers that we faced will be familiar to a lot of people. Although we got our investment decision, we got funding, we got stakeholders behind it, getting there is always a bit of a battle, and that people are in these positions to challenge us and to challenge our thinking. So we were doing quite novel ways of working for the BMA. We had to win over some hearts and minds and evidence that this was a good path to take. We got the investment that we needed, but that was predicated on project milestones and targets being met, which is as it should be, really. But sort of just that battle of getting that investment decision was quite a challenge. I guess there was some cultural change and resistance to change as well. We were going to do things very differently. We've got a very kind of normative way of working. We wanted to do things differently, so there was some resistance there that we had to address as well. And finally, I guess worth a mention is our MarTech. We've got a lot of data, like a lot of organisations. We have a lot of data about our members. It sits in disparate systems. So getting access to, or using the data that we wanted to do, making the systems work how we wanted them to work, was a bit of a challenge. It wasn't a barrier. We did what we wanted to do, but it was a bit of a challenge, and we needed to put some sort of manual workarounds in place.
Yeah, and to go back to your point, you're right. I think these are challenges that a lot of businesses faced. In the survey that we ran back in January, our survey showed that lack of support and buy-in from senior leadership team, as you were saying, was kind of a key concern. Not having the training or support or understanding of agile marketing and agile principles to really push that forward was another challenge, as well as having some of the right tools. So I know that before we talk about how you overcame those challenges, because I think that would be really interesting, I'd be curious to know if there are any external challenges that you faced as well, because a lot of the challenges that you talk about are internal, and I know that there's been a lot of disruption, certainly over the last few months, but also, within your market, there's been a lot that's been going on as well with your target audiences.
Yeah, there were, we were subject to a lot of external pressures that were outside of our control. And really, the answer to that question is working in sprints, working agile and in sprints helped us keep. We had an overarching strategy. We broke the work down into 3-week sprints. So whilst the external environment may have put pressures on something somewhere, we were able to keep a focus on what we wanted to do. And I'll give you an example. So a couple of the products that we had, one was an app. We wanted to get people using an app. One of them was a conference. There was a lot of external pressure and consternation about the conference. So although we'd set up a sprint to drive conference ticket sales, when this external pressure started to happen, we realized that we just need to let that play out. That's out of our hands. So, okay, we've only got a 3-week sprint. Let's just divert our attention to getting more people engaged with the app and getting more uptake on the app. So I use the analogy of an oil tanker. You know, we're not a giant oil tanker that we need to turn around. We're like a speedboat. We've got 3 weeks. We can just adapt and change as we go. Did that answer your question?
It did, yeah. We'll find out. We'll know more in the Q&A.
Yeah, if I didn't, if anyone's got any questions, just ask.
Yeah, no. And I guess, sorry, looking at some of these barriers, and as you said, these were things that you experienced as well at the BMA. So how can businesses overcome this? I mean, if we take, for example, the first one around, stakeholder buy-in, but also that focus on the leadership team, which, as you said earlier, was a real challenge for you guys.
Yeah, and I'll be upfront with you. We didn't get buy-in immediately. You know, we have an in-house team that we wanted to use. But our in-house sort of marketing communications team are always under a huge amount of pressure. We're a trade union, we're a lobbying organisation, so they have a lot of political lobbying communications that they need to get out there to the right audience and navigate. So we use the in-house team we've got in the same way, but we didn't get the kind of results that we wanted to see. So that lent, I guess it lent a bit of support to our cause that we were talking about wanting to do things differently. We didn't have the know-how or the expertise to do things differently. So we started to then get the evidence that we needed to talk to senior leadership and to talk to our stakeholders about what doing things differently looked like, what support we needed to do that. And that's kind of helped unlock some of the thinking and certainly unlock some of the investment decision making. And also in terms of stakeholder buy-in, the fact that Agile is organised in sprints, that agility and ability to adapt really helped senior management understand that we weren't the oil tanker just going in one direction and it was going to be really hard to turn around. We were nimble, we could change things, we could adapt, and that they got very animated about that once they realised that the concept of how it worked. They really bought into that concept.
Yeah, and I think the key thing in terms of everything that you said there really is it's the communication piece. So
yeah.
To get them invested and get them on that journey, you've got to communicate, and that's at the very beginning when you're talking about your vision and your strategy and how everyone has a role to play in that, so that they become invested and they understand where they slot into that, and then continuing to communicate and celebrate the successes, celebrate the learnings that are generated, and really demonstrating the value, even if it is, as you were saying, taking learnings around LinkedIn adverts or improved email click rates. They're all learnings that you can take for how you can improve your broader marketing, not just from a campaign perspective.
There was some good old-fashioned stakeholder management plans in place. So at our steering group, it was sort of, okay, Director A, you're going to go and speak to the treasurer. Director B, you're going to, in your next conversation with the CEO, just drop that into the conversation, And then there was the formal communications around the business case and the highlight reports and the things like that. But that constant up and down, all across communication about what we're doing and the importance of it and the output and outcome of it, that was key.
Yeah, and what about if we move on to one of the other points on the slide there? What about the tooling and the Martech?
Martech wasn't. I guess we used what we had. It wasn't a problem for us. We didn't have to make big investments in new systems or new technologies, we did have data that was all over the place, and we had to put in some manual workarounds around that. But we were able to just get on with it. And I think, although some of it was a challenge, we now have Agile know-how in the organisation. We know what improvements to the systems we'd like to make in the future. And a really important takeaway for me is, if we are going to embed Agile as a more permanent way of working in our association, we have requirements now and that we can feed into the specifications of any future system changes. So yeah, it didn't work completely smoothly. We had to put in some manual workarounds in terms of our systems, but we know how to make some improvements in the future, and that's a really important takeaway.
Yeah, and I think there is a really important message there as well, in terms of, you don't need to have every MarTech tool in the world in order to become agile. There's a lot of tools that businesses are already using that can enable them to take a much more agile mindset, and it's more about making the most of what you've got and being smart with that before you then take the decision as to what other tools, software, platforms that you then need to bring in to support your goals moving forward. It's not one of the points that's on this slide here, but I really would quite like to talk about culture, because certainly from our experience at Bright working with clients, culture can be a real big barrier to embedding agile marketing. It's something that you flagged as well. So what are the inroads that you've made there? Because I know that it's still a journey that you're going on, and it's not just suddenly resolved.
I think any change practitioner, someone who's worked in an environment where you're changing things, you need to understand what your as-is situation is, and you need to understand what your to-be situation looks like, and what the gaps are, and how you get there. So we knew that we wanted to create a team that was familiar and worked in this agile methodology. We needed a hub there where people came together. So we created an environment and a culture that we wanted to attract people to. So we talked about the fact that we would train people in terms of what Agile is. You always want to control your risk, but we would give people autonomy to work and to develop their skills in this area, and importantly to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes. So we talked about every sprint, good practices, every sprint has a retro. So we had retros at the end of every sprint, and we loved those, and we just kept talking. So this supportive environment we created and talked about creating sort of attracted the people that we wanted to work with us. So people then became pretty animated about it. They were interested in learning about agile marketing as an opportunity to do things differently, to be adaptable in the jobs that they were doing, and to take some ownership, really, and then to bring that back to the hub and talk to us about how they found it and what their lessons learned were. So I think in terms of culture, providing a supportive environment, telling people that you'll train them on how to do things differently, you will manage risk, but you will allow them to make mistakes, and that's all right. All of that, as our to-be state, helped us sort of communicate that and achieve that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of synergies as well in terms of what we were talking about, the stakeholder buy-in and communication being really critical to help change that culture as well, recognizing agile behaviors, encouraging them, finding those success stories and ambassadors that can help promote the benefits of agile ways of working to the wider team.
And again, this was where our steering group came in. Directors were sending emails to the team saying, "We've got your back. Do this. Have fun doing it. This is a new way of working. This is a new skill set. So go with it. We're all supportive of this," and that really helped us.
Yeah. What result? I guess ultimately, what results did you achieve over the last sort of 6 to 9 months of embedding Agile in your?
Yeah, I think from a From a project perspective, I'd say we did achieve targeted communications to our target audience, some of which, as I mentioned before, were not members of the BMA. In that sense, they were difficult to reach people. So we achieved a higher click-through rate onto the website than we've seen previously, a higher open rate of emails that we've seen previously, and the uptake of products and services that we were bringing to market was what we wanted to achieve. So. And also, I think from a project perspective, we really did break down some of those silos and some team barriers. So from a project perspective, a big tick. We did what we wanted to set out to do. From a corporate perspective, we are now, I think, more educated into what our data gaps are. We have better know-how of running agile marketing, and we have an ambition to move more towards agile marketing in the future. Excuse me. We also, I think, fostered curiosity and challenging new ways of working, and fostered this culture of it being all right to experiment and do things a little bit differently. Especially the A/B testing works really well for us. And examples would be this kind of advert or that kind of advert, which gets the most clicks, a long form email or a short form email, this tone of voice or that tone of voice. That works really well for us and helps us achieve the click-through rates and the sales that we wanted to. Yeah.
Okay. And what would be your advice for businesses looking to get started?
I'd say I'd give 3 bits of advice really. One is dare to think differently. It's okay to do things a little bit differently, however traditional you are. Dare to think differently. Also, number 2, start small. Call it a pilot, just something that you can test a hypothesis. When you've kind of made that decision, handpick your team, communicate the ways of working, your agile way of working, and understand what this looks like for your organization. And the third point is start now. There is nothing stopping you starting now. We could have done a lot of navel gazing at the BMA about our data, about our systems, about all the things that would stop us from doing this. And with the support of Bright, we just demolished all of that and said, right, look, we just need to crack on, let's do it.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because, embedding agile ways of working, it isn't a quick fix. It isn't something that can be done overnight. So start small, find those areas of value where you really feel agile marketing can support or can demonstrate some value and start to work that through. Oh, were you going to say something, Adrian?
I was just going to say, the BMA is a member organisation. We can't do anything without the member approval. We're a very traditional organisation. We managed to do it. We thought differently. We bought the members. Getting member engagement and buy-in was as part of the stakeholder engagement plan was super important. But as soon as they understood what we were doing and they bought into it, I guess my takeaway is if we can do it, any organisation can do it.
Great. I mean, I guess that concludes the end of our presentation webinar webinar section. Apologies. I'll open it up to questions now. Zoe, have we had any questions come through?
Yeah, hi guys. We've had quite a lot of questions actually. Ooh. So I'm just going to pick a few out that we've had. People have been liking the ones I think they're particularly interested in.
Okay.
So one of the questions that is around the tooling.
Yeah.
So what kind of practical tools do you use to manage each of the sprints? Things like Trello, spreadsheets, etc. Would we be able to just talk about some of the things we've used perhaps with clients? And
yeah,
as you said, it's not always about investing in new things. It's about using things you've got more effectively.
Yeah. So I guess from a project management perspective, there's a number of different tools that you can use. So a simple way to get started would be something like Trello, where you can create a fairly simple Kanban board to track, create your sprint backlog and track how you're progressing through the sprint with all of the different activities. We use Monday.com, which is also it provides a very similar sort of functionality. It's just got a very different user interface, and it has a little bit more around the engagement side of things. I think the really important thing that we didn't talk too much about as well is really around your collaboration tools. So whether you're using things like Teams, Slack, Skype for Business, whatever it might be, having those collaboration tools where you can talk and you can engage as a team, particularly right now at the moment where we're all working virtually and remotely, is going to be really critical for keeping those lines of communication open and supporting the collaboration that's needed as part of the sprint management. I don't know, Adrian, if you've got anything that you'd like to add on top of that.
Right now in our lockdown, digital tools are super helpful. We ran a good old-fashioned Kanban board. On a whiteboard, we post-it notes. You know, what's in the pipeline, what we're doing, what's been done, and that was really well for us when we were able to all be in an office together around that wall. So sometimes analog works just as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's important to say as well. Like, I think Trello, it's free anyway, but you can also create these. You can do it on whiteboards and everything else as well. You can use environments in your offices to support this too.
Yeah.
Great. Some of the other questions that have been particularly well liked: did your sprint targets vary, or were they quite consistent over time? How many targets did you identify for each sprint? And that's from, oh, no name, but yeah.
Okay. Adrian, shall I start this and then
Go on, yeah.
Okay. So I think so generally speaking, what we set like a goal or a hypothesis for the project as a whole, and then we break it down into specific KPIs that you have over the course of a sprint. So really the KPIs are all about, it's all about how you can then achieve that overarching project goal. So if we're talking about a campaign as an example, then it might be that you set as a campaign target X number of sales qualified leads, improving engagement by X. So really at the very beginning of any sort of project, you would set out what your overarching goals are and the metrics and KPIs that you want to achieve, or that you're looking to achieve over a course of those sprints. And then you start to break it down over each of those sprints, and sometimes they change because as you're testing and you're learning, you're understanding that some of those metrics aren't quite right, and they need to shift and they need to move. And that's something that we saw at the BMA, and Adrian, perhaps you can talk a little bit about that yourself. But really it's all about keeping in alignment with that overarching project goal. In this case, if we talk about it from a campaign perspective, it's what is your campaign objective, and then the KPIs and metrics that will help you achieve that.
So thanks, Sean. I said it earlier, bite-sized chunks worked for us. The proposition that we took to market had six different elements. Some of it was driving calls to that product or that service. Some of it was driving ticket sales for a conference. Some of it was driving users of an app. So we broke that down over the period of time that we were doing agile marketing and into these bite-sized chunks. Sometimes we our target was, for instance, 100 users adopting the app. Sometimes our focus for the sprint conference ticket sales, and as I mentioned earlier, the external environment meant that we had to change the focus of that sprint, and so we took it back. We knew overarching what our goals were. We wanted 700 people on the app. We wanted X number of conference ticket sales. So we broke that down into the sprints and bite-sized chunks for the targets per sprint.
Yeah, and the great thing about Agile, it's data driven, so you can adjust those KPIs as you roll forward. Another client that we've been working on a virtual event experience with, which has gone live this week, smashed their targets by over 300%. So that's down to the fact that every time they found successful ways of working, they optimized it and they rolled it forward. So the final question that we've probably got time for today, and we'll scoop up the rest and send out responses after the event, is from Alan. You mentioned the culture word, and I find that's a major challenge, genuinely the hardest piece. Any suggestions? Probably a good one for Adrian.
Yeah.
You know, we had a very traditional way of working in our organisation. One of the things was channel owner rights. So the people who own the social media channels write the social media content. People who own BMA News write the BMA News. So breaking that down, that culture was really difficult, really fixed ways of working. And one of the ways that helped us break down that sort of cultural embedded way of working was to bring managers into the Agile hub so we could talk about in real time resource allocation. Who is going to do what? Who is going to write this? All right, if somebody writes that, we need to put it out on LinkedIn. We need to put it out as a tweet. We need to put it out as a news piece. We need it on the app. So let's just talk about how we make that happen. And it might not be one person producing the content and then writing it in different forms for different channels, but having conversations in real time with the decision makers really helped us sort of break down some of those cultural and ingrained ways of working.
Yeah, I agree with that, Adrian. And just one of the things I saw whilst we were working on that project with you guys was that the team became more and more empowered to make some of those decisions themselves, which is really important so that they can own it and keep the pace.
Yeah. That's the thing. A lot of people, when any sort of change happens, there's always people look inwards, and some people will see it as an opportunity and some will see it as a threat. And for those that see it as an opportunity, you'll find that the cultural change is easier. I'm not saying that it's easy, but it's a lot easier than those that certainly see it more as a threat. And so in that instance, it really is about selling the vision and telling them what their role is in that and what their part is to play, and giving them the autonomy to take that forward, and giving them the support and the training and everything that they need in order to do that effectively. But you've really got to, it can't just be something that is forced on them. You've got to get them involved and give them tasks, responsibilities, things that they can take as their own.
I'd agree with that. You know, we set out what our new environment was going to be. We looked at the skill set that we needed, and we attracted people to that different way of working. And as I said before, they got quite animated about that, about being in that Agile hub and trying things differently.
Great, thanks guys. I think that's all we've got time for question-wise. As I said, we'll scoop up the questions and make sure we respond to those following this session.
Great. So I guess to wrap up, just wanted to say thank you for joining us today. As Zoe mentioned, if you do, we'll be responding to questions after this. But if you have any further questions or any suggestions for future webinar topics, then please let us know in the chat function, or feel free to send us an email to hello@brightinnovation.co.uk. One of the key findings from the Agile survey that we ran earlier on this year was that marketers wanted to understand how to get started. So we've decided to create a marketing agility calculator to help you identify where you would get the most value from Agile ways of working and recommendations on your journey to greater agility. Looking for volunteers to take part in our prototyping process. So if you are interested, please let me know, again, in the chat function or via hello@brightinnovation.co.uk, and we'll share further details after the session. And if you are interested in understanding more about Agile marketing, we run an Agile Marketing Club meetup for marketers interested in this area. So please follow us for more details on our next event, and we hope to see you there soon.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.